So we do have quorum.
Okay. I'm going to pull up the agenda here and we'll get cracking. Who are we missing still?
We do not have Darren, who's not able to attend tonight, and Harvey has not joined yet.
Okay. Okay, I'd like to call this March 30th Environment Committee meeting to order. First, I'd like to acknowledge that we're meeting on the traditional territories of the Snuneymuxw First Nation. And could I get a motion for the adoption of the agenda?
So moved.
On, seconded by Jerome. All in favor? Adopted. And could I get a motion for the adoption of the minutes?
So moved.
Moved by Don, seconded by Wally. All in favor? Opposed? Minutes adopted. And this brings us to our first item on the agenda, which is an item that has been carried over multiple times and some important information. So I'll turn it over to Ms. Pan. I guess we're going to everybody's by first names. So Ting, go ahead.
Thank you. I have to unmute myself and I'm going to share my screen. Let me know if it is working. So can you see the slide now?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. All right, so this will be a quick overview of the Clean BC Roadmap to 2030. And because you have received this presentation ahead of time, so I'm gonna, for efficiency, I'm gonna really just touch on kind of the highlights and especially the policy areas that have more direct implications to local governments. Sorry. So the original Clean BC plan was launched in December 2018, and the initiatives that were in that plan at the time it was launched, it recognized that only had to get us 3/4 of the way to the 2030 climate targets of the province. So reducing emissions by 40% below 2007 levels, that's the target. And then the second phase of the Clean BC roadmap to 2030 is basically the plan that really closed that gap. So the roadmap, instead of looking at discrete policy action items and modeling their emissions reductions, they're looking more broadly 8 key areas, or what they call it, the pathways across BC economies that generates emissions or can create solutions. And they also look at how each different pathways, have different maturity levels. For example, in buildings and in the transportations, we have mature technologies. The market is more ready than, for example, in carbon removal and sequestration and engineering solutions for carbon removal. So it recognizes, their different level of maturity requires different policy actions. And so they set out a series of pathways to really drive deployment in areas where clean solutions are already mature, and then support innovation in areas where clean solutions are still kind of developing and emerging. So these are the 8 pathways. I think that the one that have the most impact on local governments, kind of our community emissions, are transportation, buildings, low carbon energy, and community. So I'm going to focusing more on those pathways. But before we get into each pathways and the policy actions, here are some kind of overarching policy directions. and they call it the Marquis Measures that will probably affect the broad economy. So there's a commitment to put a stronger pricing on carbon pollution with corresponding affordability and competitiveness protection. So that is something that is, I believe, the consultation is happening in this quarter. So basically, the federal government has already said the floor that the carbon price will be at least $170 per ton by 2030. And each province will have to propose a carbon pricing scheme that is at least equivalent to that. So BC is still figuring out, what that looks like for our province. So right now, I think as of, is it 2 days from now, April 1st, we'll move towards $50 per ton. So, from here, April 2022 to $170 per ton by 2030 was not an insignificant move. The second one is accelerate zero emission vehicle law. So right now we have a zero emission vehicle mandate for light duty vehicles. They have moved that timeline forward. So from from 2040, there is going to be a requirement for all new sales of the zero emission vehicles. Only zero emission vehicles will be available for sale by 2040, and I think they moved that timeline to 2035. BC has done pretty well in terms of being on track. And there's also a promise to set new targets for medium and heavy duty vehicles. The province is going to develop a comprehensive clean transportation action plan. The low carbon fuel standard is a standard that lowers the carbon intensity of fuels that are sold in the province, and they're going to double that target for renewable fuels produced in BC to that amount by 2030. A new legislation is being developed to put a GHG cap for natural gas utilities customers. So these include natural gas, FortisBC and Pacific Northern Gas, the two largest natural gas utilities. The emissions associated with their products to the customers in BC will have to meet this, have to be under this new GHG cap, which is essentially about half of their current emissions. Enhance the Clean BC program for industry, ensure oil and gas achieve its sectoral targets, near elimination of industrial methane emissions by 2035, and 75% reduction in oil, gas, and methane by 2030. So these are related to the industrial pathway. New large industrial facility to work with government to demonstrate how they align with government's 2030 and 2040 targets, and submit plans to achieve net zero emissions by 2050. And this is another thing that will have an impact on us, is the zero carbon new buildings and highest efficient standards for new space and water heating equipment by 2030. What this means is that the space and water heating equipments have to be at least 100% by 2030, and that they will not be available after that time in the market. So they're basically steering away from things like oil heating or the conventional gas furnace, and moving towards more efficient equipments like electric heat pump. They're also going to launch a new program to support local government climate action. You've probably heard of the CARET program, that the province transfers money to the local government based on the carbon tax that we pay every year. We get 100% back. And the new program, I believe they have increased the amount of funds available to local governments. It's going to be launched this year, and we should be receiving that money this year to support our local climate action. So here's the policies by each pathway. So low carbon energy policy proposals, so that includes the two major ones, is the low carbon fuel standard increased targets, and the GHG reduction standard, which is the one that puts a cap on natural gas utilities. And also includes implementing 100% clean electricity delivery standard for BC Hydro. So this is the intention is that 100% of our hydroelectric power will be renewable and clean. They're going to phase out any fossil fuel electricity generation. and support BC Hydro's electrification plan by adding electrification and fuel switching to its mandate. Implement the hydrogen strategy and double Made in BC renewable fuel targets. So some relevant transportation policies. So they're taking this approach to develop their clean transportation action plans with an efficiency first approach. So the first priority is to reduce the distance traveled. So this aligns very well with our city plan's direction of kind of really focusing on the land use and focusing on reducing that need to drive. And then you can see like the second tier was increasing mode shift, improving vehicle efficiency, and really at the bottom was talking about ZEV vehicles and using cleaner fuels. They are increasing the light duty vehicle mandate targets to 26% by 2026, 90% by 2030, and 100% by 2035. So we have moved that last timeline by 5 years. They plan to develop a new medium and a heavy-duty vehicle, zero-emission vehicle requirements aligned with California. The main challenge there has been technology. So there hasn't been enough, like a variety of medium and heavy-duty vehicles on the market to be adopted widely. Tailor Green BC Go Electric program to better support low and middle income British Columbians. Develop a right to charge legislation. So that is a legislation that will be enabling multi-unit residential buildings and condos to have charging infrastructure to their residents. Establish provincial mode share targets. So they have a target of 25% reduction in vehicle kilometers driven by cars by 2030 using the 2020 baseline, and also specific like a mode share percentages. So increasing trips by walking, cycling, and transit to 30% by 2030, 40% by 2040, and 50% by 2050. And compared to Nanaimo, I think overall we have in our transportation master plan to have the active transportation modes like increasing it to 24% by 2040.
Ting, can I just, through the chair, could I just, for the sake of our ledge services, would you be able to slow down a little bit so they can catch up with their note taking?
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, no worries. So the next one is to establish the commercial transportation energy and emissions intensity targets to encourage greater mode shifts, electrify public transit and ferry fleets, and targets 10,000 public EV charging stations by 2030, and ensure by 2024 pretty comprehensive coverage of fast chargers across BC. So I think most of what I'm saying is really already in the slides. So I don't think that they're missing too much if I'm talking too fast. On buildings and a community side, they would have the policy to decarbonize new construction through carbon pollution standards in the BC Building Code. So this is introducing a GHG intensity targets in the BC Building Code. Right now we have the energy step code that are mostly focusing on energy efficiency. But this is to say that they're gonna also develop a standard focusing on carbon pollution. They'll try to reduce emissions in existing homes and buildings through highest efficiency standard for new space and water heating equipment. This is probably one area that will make quite a significant impact to our existing homes and buildings, which we understand is a great challenge because local government don't have a lot of tools to have an influence in the existing building market. And the next couple of items are related to energy efficiency programs that, currently we don't have a lot of incentives for building envelope. So they're going to enhance the incentive for, improving, air tightness to reduce drafting in the homes. And also they are no longer incentivizing conventional gas-fired heating equipment. It will develop guidance and building sector capacity for climate resilient building design. This is also an action that is reflected in our city plan. And develop strategy to minimize embodied carbon in materials and support adoption of low carbon building materials. And ensure incentive programs benefit those with the greatest needs. And also proceed with the next steps on a property assessed clean energy program. So this is the financing program to support people do the energy efficiency and remove that barrier of upfront investment. And then that investment will be paid back through the savings that the homeowners will get on their property tax bill through a property tax mechanism. So the next step I would expect is the province to enact an enabling legislation for local governments to implement a PACE program. On the community side, I already mentioned that there will be a new program to support local government climate action. It will be predictable, fairly substantial, compared to what we had before. And especially for smaller communities, there will be, funding to not only support your climate programming and projects, but to be used to support staffing resources and use that as matching fund, for example, for grant applications. Review of a legislation to enable, require, or support action on climate action goals. And building awareness of programs for Indigenous communities, continue capacity building, streamlining application process, and also advocacy with federal government for supports. Focus on complete and compact communities to align with integrated planning approach and the Homes for BC Housing Plan. So that is also very much aligned with the city plan approach. I think if no one objects, I'm going to skip over this slide. Happy to, look into it when you have time. But since we don't have any heavy industry or oil gas in our community, I think this is less of a focus.
That's great, and the slides are there for people to read too.
Exactly. So sequestration policy. So there are a number of things that we have already started to look at. Like grow our carbon sinks through investment in reforestation. And then there's the federal 2 billion trees program that I think we were looking at. So there's a number of pretty broad policy proposals that may be relevant to us, but I'm not going to go into details now. I should mention that the first item, finalize the forest carbon offset protocol to increase the creation of forest offsets. So there is an opportunity to create offsets through the protection of potentially community forests. So there is a protocol now that is developed for BC. And so that is something potentially to look at in the future. Negative emissions technologies. So this is definitely an area that the new technologies are still emerging. There's still a lot of uncertainties around when they will become more affordable or commercially available. And the province is really looking to, supporting innovation in this area. And on reconciliation, just want to mention that the roadmap was developed alongside Indigenous engagements. There has been some very significant feedback that is being considered. And I think that is something we should also be aware of. And then, there's a lot of, resources and focus on, the potential opportunities and partnership with Indigenous peoples. So here's kind of showing just how the phase 1, the Clean BC plan will get us, where that will land, and then how the phase 2 Clean BC roadmap will help us get us to the 2030 targets in the province. And the last couple of slides are just a summary, and I just want to point out, you can see that if you look at the subtotal, the most significant pathway that will reduce our provincial emissions was really around low carbon energy and transportation. And I compared this to buildings and industry. So we kind of get a sense of where those big reduction actions will be coming from a provincial point of view. I think that's it. And happy to take any questions. Sorry that I was going so fast.
Don, go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. Two questions. I'm looking at page 5 of that report, and the top right one says the near elimination of industrial methane emissions. And we've been having this conversation on and off about the language that's going into the city plan. And when it was suggested that we have the elimination of organic waste matter to the landfill, it was pointed out that if you say that and you don't achieve it, then there's a chance you might get sued by the public. So I'm guessing the near elimination of industrial methane, could the words near elimination be used to strengthen our resolve and wording in the plan, as opposed to work towards or consider? Is that a word, near elimination? Is that something we can use?
Through the chair, I can attempt to answer that.
Yep, please.
Absolutely. This is, again, language is important. We're trying to reflect what we're hearing from the community, also from council, so council can direct us to use this type of language. One of the tricky things with an OCP, though, in terms of being sued, under the Local Government Act, while it's clear that we have to be consistent, like our land uses have to be consistent with zoning and the designations, in terms of some of the other actions, the Local Government Act is quite clear that although we have our policies and directions in the OCP, it doesn't tie local governments to actually doing all of those things. So I don't know if a lawyer would agree with me, but I think it would be hard to sue us if we couldn't achieve some of the things we aspire to. So just some thoughts, and I don't know if anybody else on the call has thoughts about that, but thought I would just mention that, Councilor Bonner.
Thanks. That was my understanding of why we couldn't use the word eliminate, which I quite liked, but that's fine and good to know, because I still think the language needs to be beefed up a bit right across the plan, honestly. The second question I have is it's regarding the concept of below a certain level a year, and if I remember correctly, where did I see it? It's basically something along the lines of 75% below the 2014 levels. And is that more than 75% below now, or like how does that working? Like because our levels are now, I say, on any particular these of things that we're producing, GHGs and that sort of thing. If we went 75% and below right now, we want to drop it 75%, or is 75% of a smaller number back in 2014? So in terms of when we see something like that, is it a smaller number we're talking about, or is it a bigger number we're talking about?
Through the chair, are you referring to the second point, the second bullet on the slide?
Yeah, that's a good example.
Yeah. So
no, it talks about or reduce emissions by 40% below 2007 levels, right?
That's right.
So is that reduction of 2007 levels, which were lower than they are now, a larger reduction, or is this just sort of things that the province is playing with because it basically means that we don't have to reduce as much because it's that amount isn't as much as if we reduce 40% of today's levels?
So through the chair, I think that this probably illustrates more clearly what they're talking about. So we can see that 2007 is, roughly between 2005 and 2010. There is a bit of an increase just before 2020. So you can see where our emissions have been over the last decade. And so the baseline 2007, that's not changing. And so 40% below that level is our target for 2030. And what they're saying in that second bullet is that the first Clean BC roadmap will only get us 75% of the way to that 2030 target. And this roadmap is meant to close that gap.
Okay. If we were putting that type of language in our plan, I would like to see what the actual numbers are attached to it, just so that when the general public's reviewing it, they don't have to find some sort of other document that says, well, what was the level in 2014 or 27 or 2007? That sort of thing. It's just a suggestion going forward, just to make it easier to understand.
Right. You meant that the actual million tons or the tons of CO2s that we need to hit at a certain year as a target.
Yeah, I don't mind keeping it as 40% below such and such a year, but also to tell us what it was at that year, so we know exactly what we're talking about.
Right. I see what you mean. Thanks.
I'm done.
Great, thanks, Don. Elise. Oh, Bill, did you have a response to that?
Thanks, Chair. Just to follow up to Don's question, on page 53 of the Reimagine or the city plan, shows exactly, I believe, the graph that you're referring to, Don. Just as a...
Thanks, Bill. Elise.
Thank you. This question is for Ting. Through Clean BC, I'm just wondering if there's anything about BC stopping with the accepted imports of coal-powered energy. Thank you. Or reducing that.
Through the chair, you were just wondering if there is anything in Clean BC that specifies stopping the imports of a coal power to be used in BC?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's kind of captured under the low carbon energy policies.
Okay.
Yeah, so so for example, the low carbon fuel standard applies to any fuel that is sold in BC. So the way that they regulate it is each year the carbon intensity of the fuels used in BC, sold in BC, have to continue to drop. So any energy suppliers that want to sell their fuels, they have to demonstrate that they can meet that. And if they don't have enough of clean and renewable fuels to be sold in BC, they have to buy it from someone else or have to get the credits. Otherwise, they have to pay a fine. So it is slowly driving the entire pool of the fuels to be renewable and cleaner over time.
Thank you.
Bill, is your hand up there remnant, or you got another response or question?
Sorry, Chair, it was a remnant.
Cool. I'm not seeing any other hands. Thank you, Ting, for bringing that forward. It's good to know the provincial context of the things that we're working on. So yeah, thank you. Brings us to 5B, Reimagine Policy Review and Update. So I'm not sure, Lisa?
Hi. Good evening, everyone. Before we start in Reimagine, you might see the front of the Clean BC PowerPoint, and I actually thought that was Ting and her daughter, but even she thought it was herself, but it happened to not be her, even though she did work for the organization of the province. So I thought I would make a note of that because I had assumed that. So
in case you're wondering.
Yes, that's right. So I'm going to introduce this and Ting's going to run us through. And so what we're doing today is we had the Environment Committee share with us their interest in seeing how everything connected through all parts of City Plan. And we have really focused with you on the green goals. and we've given you a bit of an overview of the structure of the whole plan. And so there's just an opportunity to quickly run through other elements of the plan that integrate the concept of the donut that you guided us on over a year ago, and also how woven throughout the whole plan are elements that deal not only with green objectives, but also provide support towards greenhouse gas reduction, a more equitable society, and all those different elements that are part of the environmental and social aspects of the Nanaimo donut. So with that, Ting will be presenting and I'll be available for questions too. Thanks.
Sounds good. Did I mute myself or am I good, Coco?
You're good.
Okay. Sorry, I can't actually see my screen anymore. Yeah, so this is just a kind of an overview of the city plan structure because we didn't get time to review this last time. And I know that for the last two committee meetings, we were very heavily focused on just green policies. And so this kind of, taking a step back and having a bigger picture. So the best way to look at it is through the table of contents. We have the framework, the Nanaimo Donuts framework, where we really, explain the concept of the ecological limits and, the social needs of the community. And of course, you have gone through the Green Nanaimo policy areas. And then, there's quite a few areas that are referenced in the Green Nanaimo, but really they're situated in different parts of the city plan. So we have the Connected Nanaimo that mostly talk about, mobility and transportation. And then we have the Healthy Nanaimo that focus on food security, because we know that that is the one area that that focus that is being brought up in this committee. The Green and Blue Network and land use plan, all these kind of work together to support the goals and the intentions of many things that we have in the Green Nanaimo. So just want to point that out. And then it also has development permit areas that speak specifically about some of the policy tools that we can use to achieve these desirable outcomes. And so the way that we think it could be, it is sometimes, as you have experienced when we're going through the policies, sometimes it's really hard to decide, where to put a policy action, because it could be supporting multiple objectives. So the best way we thought of is really trying to, pull out and reference these other areas, so that if you're not finding in one particular chapter, we have at the bottom, this integrated policy areas, so that you can look up these related policy actions. So for example, the Connected Nanaimo and has a lot of actions that support the emission reduction on the transportation side. So you can see that here we have under the integrated policies that the green section was referenced. And the Healthy Nanaimo, we have this food security, and it's also connected with, some of the other focus areas, like the healthy, the prosperous and the green policies. And this just explains the different layers that we have in the plan. So we have the blue-green network that focuses on the watershed and our natural assets. We have land use policies that talks about how to, develop a complete and connected communities. Mobility networks, how to facilitate a more efficient movement of goods and people, and park recreation, culture and wellness. How that is going to support, the connection to nature. So here are just some of the examples and the maps that we have, like showing in more details what they look like, and then the different layers that we have in the overall city plan structure. Please make sure that you jump in if you have something that you want to speak to any of these layers.
Sure. I think one of the things that by having these map layers tied to goals, what we found with our community members during our feedback is this kind of visual representation is not only helpful from us, what we're required to do in terms of our land use and mobility for the purposes of meeting the Local Government Act, but we've gone an extra layer in terms of communicating the Parks, Recreation and Cultural Wellness Map's a good one, to really communicate to the public, some of whom who don't want to read reams of text, visually, they're responding very well to this type of communication. So it helps us not only from the planning side, but also as a communication tool to our community. So I thought I'd just kind of point that out.
Yeah, so that's really it for us. We just want to, take a little bit of time to walk you through the structure and how, we think about, presenting this very complex plan in a more intuitive and accessible way. And I just want to touch on, the engagement and outreach for this last phase of Reimagine. So the survey is currently still open, and it will be closed on April 8th. And we just, as some of you know, that we had an open house, some pop-up events over the weekend. The first in-person open house we had in a while. And, it's really refreshing, probably in a way, to be in a room and having these very long conversations, and with many visitors. And I think the initial impression, of the team was that generally the feedback has been really positive, and there are definitely tweaks and changes that people want to see. But we certainly received also a lot of very positive comments. And Lisa, do you want to add anything about that?
No, I mean, I think we're just grateful that we were able to pivot with COVID and actually meet in person and provide that opportunity for people who prefer face-to-face dialogue, discussion, debate. And, at times it was actually quite moving that some of our community members just reflected how pleased they were where they've been following along the progress of the plan and what the results are. And some, I guess, interesting reflection on how complex it is pulling together 5 different strategic plans into one. And, almost a reminder for us that that's quite the undertaking. So it was, I must admit, I was pleased that the turnout was higher than I expected. It wasn't in the hundreds, but it was certainly given our first foray out, and that people engaged with us as long as they did. And were interested in all aspects of the plan. So it wasn't just Ting speaking about environment and getting everybody there. The same people were moving through to the more social, health, well-being, parks, recreation, culture. And I think Councillor Gaspard was there and Councillor Bonner. And yeah, there were 1 or 2 people who certainly had some hard feedback on some pieces. But overall, I was surprised at the, well, maybe not surprised, because we've gotten some good online feedback as well so far. But the in-person reflection was overwhelmingly quite positive. So I don't know if, but what we would like your help with as a committee is we are going to be doing this Friday a reminder of the last leg of the online survey, really trying to get as many as people as possible to contribute to that form of engagement. We have the statistically valid, of course, which has gone out. But we would still like the general public to contribute through the online survey as well. So.
Great. And we do have a video out there on our Get Involved website, and I'm not going to play that here. But if you haven't checked it out, I think it's a really nice summary of what we have heard, the top priority areas, and how they're being reflected, or we're trying to strike the balance in the city plan. So I do encourage you to watch it if you haven't already. I think it is a really nice summary. It's only 4 minutes. In terms of next steps, so we're now at the end of March. So the next critical milestone is the April 8th, when phase 3 engagement ends. And then there will be the GPC meeting on May 9th, where we're going to present the engagement summary. And the public hearing is going to be on June 22nd. And Lisa, do you want to speak to any of these dates?
Sure. I mean, one of the things I think for the community to be aware of is that at each stage, council has the opportunity, and the special public hearing actually has to be defined by council. So while that's the date we're aiming for, that could be adjusted, but that is what we're aiming for in order to look at having this council adopt the plan in July. And so that's the timeline we're aiming for. And then on May 9th, the other piece is the feedback we've gotten from the committees and from also the general public will all be summarized, and we'll be showing council where we propose making changes to the final draft that will be going forward for bylaw adoption, aiming for May 30th. So that's just an important kind of piece for the community to be aware of. And the community also, if people feel that they didn't get a chance to engage through the online survey, they do have a chance to present or submit more formally to council as part of the special public hearing. But we are hoping, and I must admit, I was a bit surprised that one person who I was very positive about the plan, I said, you know, have you done the survey? She said, oh, no, I don't need to do that because I trust you've done a good job. And I almost was kind of like, no, it's really important that you do give us the feedback, because it is quite normal in this stage to start with very high engagement. And as people feel more and more comfortable, they engage less and less. And then also as it becomes more in depth and they have to give more time, that's another piece as well. So we're aiming for around 500 minimum responses on the online survey, and the statistically valid is another category. But we do know the statistically valid will be an important one for council that we come back to them with. So I don't know that that's where we're at right now, and that's the schedule we're on, and just grateful for your time.
Thanks, Lisa. Thanks, Ting. Any questions? I was going to do questions on this section, and then I know Jerome had sent an email that I think is worth some discussion on regarding the draft plan, and I think this is probably a good section to delve into that discussion after we've got questions on this. So, any questions on the overall structure that was presented and engagement and timelines? Don?
Thanks, Chair. And I'm not sure if this is necessarily the best question for here, but it's just, I'll ask it is, in terms of engagement, have we received engagement for all the neighborhood associations? I was at my Rotary Club this morning. I told them that we're doing this. Many didn't know about it. Fairly engaged individuals. Are we reaching out to service clubs, sending them all that sort of stuff, giving them a video that they can just show on one of their meetings, stuff like that?
In terms of the neighborhood associations, we actually did hold a session with them about 2 weeks ago, and a couple who have missed it, we've been engaging them individually. So the neighborhood associations have had this information pretty much the day after council gave us. You got the draft on February 28th. So we've had pretty good, and we've had some formal feedback, I think, from 2 so far. Others have sent theirs in individually through the neighborhood associations. And in terms of the service clubs and the others, we've been using the distribution list that we used during phase 1 and phase 2, but I can double check and see if service clubs were part of that. I believe they were, but I can't give you the, oh, Christy's popped on. So Christy might have the answer for me.
Most of the service clubs in town have definitely been contacted through phase 1, 2, and 3. And I also presented to a couple of them. The newcomers is one as our survey launched about a month ago, but they have been engaged. I don't know about all Rotaries, but I believe all Rotaries are on our list, as well as Lions and many of the other Probus newcomers. All of them should be represented.
Oh, thank you, Christy. And through the chair, one thing I might add is we do have, when we have contact emails, the odd time if somebody isn't great at checking their email, but they're the main contact, there are times there can potentially be a few delays in distributing. The other one is the school district, of course, have been very helpful. And there've been a couple of VIU classes where at least maybe one class I presented to, the professor gave homework as the survey as an alternative to doing an essay, and required a little bit more depth from the survey, in which they had to look at the background materials, not just simply do the survey. So any other people who would like to engage us like that in the next week or so, we would happily do a quick presentation and support particularly our youth giving feedback.
Great. Any more questions? Okay. Thanks. So yeah, I think this would be appropriate time to have a quick discussion on some feedback that Jerome sent in. Basically, this is quite a large endeavor, and staff have been integrating, 5 different plans into one. And, council's been going through at the Governance Priorities Committee, each section by section, and looking at the different policies. And there's been discussion just on language, and then also between policies and actions, and trying to differentiate the two and what goes where. I know there was a motion put forward by this committee about something around a moratorium, or to advocate around a moratorium and provincial powers around limiting natural gas and new developments. And it was decided that wasn't going to go into the OCP because based that it would be in a following action document. And I think, in looking at other sections, there seems to be a blend between actions and policies. And, Jerome has been quite persistent in feedback around this, and sort of the need to maybe have a bit more focused look and commitment to go through that editing process. And I think maybe, Jerome, do you want to speak a little bit to this and, put it out there for the committee to discuss a little, and also get some staff feedback on some of these elements?
Sure. Well, I think you sort of framed it. I mean, I think the presentation we saw, the message that I get from that is that the big picture aspects are in place. And that's what I think those maps really show, and the connectivity between some of the different aspects of the plan and how they connect. Those parts are in place. Where I still struggle a bit, and this is connected to the discussion we had at the special meeting, is that we spent a lot of time talking about the wording of the policies, but the wording of the policies is one layer of, I think, what needs to be tweaked or edited. The layer above that is the structure. And then what I guess bothers me in the way that it's currently written, that I don't think we can just sort of like remove this issue by tweaking the wording, is that there's a lot of policy statements, and many of those policy statements contain actions, or can be considered to be actions depending on how the wording of the policies is created. And I understand how we've arrived at these sort of lists of 7 or 8 different policy statements for one category, because there's a bit of this combining of different plans. And I understand that that's how we've arrived at this stage, but there needs to be a bit of an editing for content that needs to happen to clarify those policy statements as best we can, so that they can then be connected to actions that are very, very clear. And right now, I think we're sort of the structure is such that if we continue on this path, we're not going to be able to pull those out clearly. And what I see is down the road is a challenge in terms of enunciating and creating actions to support the policies that support the larger objective, the big picture, that are going to become complicated to implement. And so it's almost like you need to sort of step back a bit and sort of pick away at the main ideas. And when we submitted comments for the last special meeting, some of my comments spoke to this, the fact that there were 3 statements that kind of overlap a bit, but they're also distinct. And so they could be integrated into a single overarching comment, so that you can then clearly lay out actions that support that. And I don't think right now we're at the stage where we can take the policy statements and clearly see what the action that is needed to support it would be. And unless we get to that point, it's going to be very tricky to write the action statements that follow later, because I see that they're following later. And in a way, those two parts, the policy and the actions that support it, have to kind of be done iteratively and together. But I think there's a hurdle that we need to remove first, which is really clarifying what the policy statements really aim to do. And that's a structural issue in the plan currently as it is. And then like there's a mixing of these different components in the plan, and that needs to be cleared up, I think. Anyways, I guess that's my comment. And it's something I think that does not, unless you read through the details of the plan, I don't know how much feedback you get at that level of the plan. But at some point, the question will be, okay, how do you do this? Or what are you going to do to get there? And that's not something that is clearly on the horizon reading the policy statements. And that will compound over time, because at some point we're going to have to talk about metrics. How do we know we're doing the right things? How do we know we're going in the right direction? And if those actions are not clearly enunciated, then the metrics will not be easy to define, nor will they be very meaningful. So I guess I'll stop and then maybe get some other comments on this, because that's just my impression, my perspective.
And just from the email I sent in as well, Jerome, just you mentioned there's a certain structure within our official community plan that has like goals and outcomes, and then policies, and then these actions that will be coming later. Yeah. And then I'm hearing you mentioned is that another strategic planning thing is sort of like goals, outcomes, strategies, and then tactics or actions. Tyler Brown has brought this up as well, that that's a hierarchical structure to be able to work planning from, and I guess. Does the OCP, I'm trying to understand the OCP structure of the policies and then the actions, how that fits, or is it appropriate to utilize that framework of goals, objectives, strategies, and tactics? And if, given that there's so many different plans that have been integrated into this one, that the hierarchy gets blended, one plan might have the hierarchy a bit more blended differently, and now we're trying to bring it all together and have a sort of a commonality so that can provide coherence across everything that we're doing. Do we need to, what is a policy trying to articulate? And I know at the GPC there was brought forward some stuff around the directionality in that, but does further teasing need to occur, and could that potentially shorten down the document a little bit? And then provide more clarity on the actions. And so, I don't know if anybody wants to add to this before staff kind of speak to it. Wally?
Yeah, it's something I mentioned last time, Mr. Chair, just to muddy the waters a little. There's a hierarchy of law, as you know, with municipal up to provincial, up to federal, and one will supersede the other. There was a game changer in that Supreme Court case, and I've had several discussions with the Municipal Insurance Association. I'm not a lawyer, I'm an engineer, but we've had some case studies recently where I talked to a municipality this morning, they're finding conflicts between some of their operational policies and some of their core policies, and they're going back and reviewing them. And they're coming back to the wording of Don's issue earlier on some of these things. Discussions we've had with Municipal Insurance Association this week, because they are lawyers, we're not, or I'm not, and I'm mostly dealing with the asset management policy, and I need to know in dealing with that sort of, where does the Supreme Court decision, which is the first that we have, that sort of has given some clarification to councils. There's a special edition of the MAAC bulletin that came out that's public and on their website. I'm sure your legal department has it and your risk managers have it, with some guidelines. And they told me this week they're working on some additional tools. I don't have the answers. What I do have is a lot of questions. I'm really very concerned right now about the wording of policies in relation to that Supreme Court case, because we now have the highest court in Canada giving us some pretty clear direction, and that may not exempt a municipality in any or some or none cases. I don't know yet, from provincial legislation if you don't abide by the Supreme Court guidelines and decision. It's really a bit of a loose cannon at the moment, and we're really trying to get some guidance on. I know MIABC are working very hard on trying to get some information out there. I know we'll have some for Asset Management BC. We're going to have some stuff to publish by June, but that still isn't going to have our whole answers. So I just flagged that as a caution on how policies are written and what Don's question was on that, because it's been a game changer. And I heard a presentation from a major city council a few weeks ago with the lawyer at a presentation, the same thing. Like, we really have to be thinking pretty hard of what we're doing and where we're going, because we've got something from the highest court of Canada now that we never had before. So just caution. I don't have the answers. I got way more questions than I had.
Great, thanks, Wally. So a few things there. I guess first with the structure and sort of the differentiation between policies and actions and potential being able to review. Just curious, sort of how staff are looking at that.
Well, one thing I wanted to point out, and I'm not sure if everybody got Jerome's email, but I did see the goals, strategies, tactics, and the way I was looking at it. So we have goals, the council set it, the overarching ones blended from the donut economics. And then we have what's called desired outcomes. And basically those are our objectives, right? So that's at the beginning of each. And where the tactics, or the strategies rather, is the policies, I see, Jerome. That's the same kind of language. And I hear you around that there's some policies that have overlapping but related pieces. And one of our aims here is that we have both a strategic document and we have a community document at the same time. And one of the nuances that we find when we have policies and actions, we have some policies that do sound like actions, but they're actually quite broad in their direction. So it looks like they are action oriented. And then we do have specific actions. So one of the things I wanted to point out is with the tactics, which I think the same word tactics and actions have some parallels, is that we have as staff been doing in tandem, putting together all the actions that council has already endorsed. So this council, for example, has done some very specific things. I think one example I gave council was, for example, on a policy about increasing recreation facilities throughout areas of the city. That's a very broad direction or policy. What specific action would be council endorsing a feasibility study of the South End Community Centre. And that action is sitting in a draft action plan that we will be bringing forward to council. And our decision was to focus on making sure that we landed. So what I'm trying to assure the committee and council is that we have been doing this in tandem, but it's important for us to make sure that we really get the strategies and all of those pieces correct, so that when we come to refine all these actions, some of which council have endorsed in prior documents, and others that we know that we are adding to, and then the community will get to review that sinks in with the final set of directions that we're setting. And you guys will remember March 10th last year, we did a targets and indicators workshop. And that was very much based on starting to think and frame up how we would monitor our success in meeting the different goals. So we actually started that with you through the direction of council right back on March 10th. And so I can see if I can reshare some of the outcomes of that, with the idea that once council had finalized these big picture pieces around policies, we'd come back, take all that work that we did on the targets and indicators, and embed that in a monitoring plan for council to look at in the fall. So just wanted to point out that some of these pieces, while maybe not obvious, are in flow. And I see Mr. Lindsay also has his hand up.
Mr. Chairman, is it okay if I just add on there a bit?
Please, yeah.
Yeah, thanks. And first of all, maybe just to, before I forget about it, to address Wally's comment, I just want to confirm that certainly this document, it has to meet a whole number of tests around the legislation. But obviously looking at current case law is part of that. The document itself is off with our solicitor right now to go through that process to make sure we're meeting those requirements. And thanks to Wally for bringing up that point. I'll make sure to raise that with them. On the broader part, I just wanted to, I think the discussion tonight reflects similar, at least I'm hearing similar comments to what we heard from council or the steering committee on Monday. And I think where I would say, you can agree with me, Chair, or not, but I think I heard there was some license given by the steering committee for staff to go through and look at where we can do some of that cleanup around policy and some consolidation where it's necessary. So that work's underway. We'll hear those comments. And I echo a little bit what Lisa was saying, Ms. Paulsing was saying, is that it's always a challenge when you draft these. And I think I said this to you on Monday. Yes, there absolutely are things that you could debate. Well, this is actually better served as an action. But at the end of the day, it's a community plan, and it's that balance of trying to meet everyone's interests. And of course, when staff are out trying to deal with the Parks and Rec and Culture plan, you know, not to pick on the pickleball players, but they'd like to see a policy that, you know, speaks specifically to how many pickleball courts that the city has. So it's always that balance of trying to, you know, what's policy and what's action and walking that fine line. But I certainly hear the comment about that. And I just wanted to, I guess, more clarify for myself, because when I hear structure, I think of the structure that council established early on with the donut, the framework, the 5 goals. From my perspective, that structure's worked well for this document in the integration. When I hear questions about structure now, I guess I wanted to clarify, it's more about what's a policy, what's an action, and clarification around that, because that's a different question, I guess. So that's more of a question than an answer, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I use that term. So yes, I mean, I think that's when I say structure in that sense, the meaning is hierarchy, right? The objectives, the goals, the strategies don't sit at the same levels, and some are dependent on others, and then some support the higher up in that hierarchy. That's what I mean by that. And that's where I find the confusion is that hierarchy for me gets lost in some places where there should be clear differentiation between this is an action that supports this strategy, which feeds into supporting the objective and the goal. That's what I mean by that, not the overall structure of the thing. So you're right, I'm creating confusion by that term, but it's this idea of a hierarchy of the statements that then feed into producing, you know, actions.
Yeah, and I thanks for that. I appreciate that, and I think that's consistent with what we heard from the committee, Mr. Chairman, on Monday. We do have someone who's tasked with going through the entire document at this point and kind of doing an overall edit. We have major sections. I think if you go through, you'll notice not to pick on them, but the Parks and Rec, the wellness section is certainly probably meatier than other sections. And their staff have already gone through and working on kind of consolidating and clarifying some of the language in that area. But again, the plan is always going to run that balance. Oh, there's Mr. Hardy. He has to rebut anything I say about Parks and Rec.
And culture, and don't forget culture.
Yes, and culture. But it's always that balance. But I certainly hear the comment.
I think my email came on the heels of having a discussion in the group and then seeing the plan basically being put out for public consumption. And I thought, wow, that was a draft we were discussing. We proposed some changes, some tweaking, and an ongoing discussion, and suddenly, and I was surprised to see it go out so quickly, thinking, well, all right, what's happening in between? When do those questions get addressed? At which stage? But I understand there are timelines involved in all this, but that's part of the surprise that led to my email saying, okay, what's happening in this process?
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, if I can respond to that, I think.
Yeah, Dale, and then we'll go to.
From staff's perspective, I mean, I think this committee has probably been more involved. Well, we only really have one other committee outside of the steering committee that's been involved at any real level, but this committee's been involved far more than any other group. And from staff's perspective, I'd say we've been back here, well, back December. I know January, we again talked about policies. We talked about it in your meeting in February. We took all of those comments and took them specifically directly to the steering committee last month, I guess it was now, 3 weeks ago, on a day just around the green. So, I mean, if we weren't clear about how we were taking those comments and how we were bringing them forward for consideration by council, I apologize, but that's the structure that we've been using, and verbatim taken the recommendations to the steering committee for their consideration. And I think many of them have found their way into an updated and revised plan. And I think it's better for, honestly, the plan's better for the input we received from the committee, for sure.
Thanks. Richard and then Lisa.
Thank you, Chair. And my comments may not be germane to the structure part of it. I was just more about the content side of it. Because I just remind this committee is that we are putting the Parks, Recreation, Culture Master Plan into this. And this is an experiment for us, because typically we would do our PRC Master Plan totally separate than any of the other city plans. But over the years, we see so much more overlapping, is why we see a great opportunity for us to incorporate it all. But typically a PRC Master Plan has more, if you're a pickleballer, or you're a swimmer, or if you're a skater, or you're a hiker, you want to look at the plan and find out, okay, where's my activity, sport, or whatever addressed. So that's why it's a little meatier in the sense of the PRC side of things. And because typically a PRC Master Plan will have a recommendation and an action. And what we're trying to do is fit those into a OCP that fits those other kinds of policy statements. And then where it's a real fine line between us and those policies and then actions, which, as Ms. Bopal-Singh said, are there, but we wanted to be clear here. So anyway, it's more of a content feedback than a structure feedback.
Thanks, Richard.
I just want to pick up through the chair. I'd like to pick up on something Jerome was pointing out, and I think that's around the hierarchy and the challenge that we do have a lot of policies, and what ranking do they get in terms of council's direction. And I think this is a piece where I had a good conversation with somebody at the open house who said, these are all great, but you only have so much budget and so much time. How do you prioritize? And I think, Jerome, this is one of the things you're getting at here. And one of the missing things that I think we've explained to council, but perhaps haven't done as good a job with the committee and some of our communities, explaining that one of the things that we are doing here that's quite different is that we're coming to council fairly quickly with a list of actions that are tied back to the policies, but it's hard because you're seeing the strategic document and policies separate to that. And where we've structured it is, in terms of prioritization at this point, is there are ongoing things that the city has to do. Bill Sims still has to pick up garbage. He has to do certain things that are core city services. Those are ongoing. They're not going to change. But there's policies that may accelerate their economic and environmental efficiency. And that's where council has the opportunity to prioritize. And then how we've structured things is here are some suggestions for council on what they might prioritize 0 to 5 years. Some of these will reflect for Ben and Dawn, things that this council has already endorsed and said, you know what, we want to see, I keep picking on the feasibility plan for Chase River, but there's many other things, bike lanes, metro, things that you've prioritized already. So 0 to 5 years, you've told us this is the direction you're going. And here are some things that we think, you're looking at future, so 5 to 10 years. But we can present that. We're planning, Jerome and the rest of the committee, to present that to council. Committee also will have the opportunity to give feedback, but council will have the ability to move those priorities up or down on an annual basis as they review their budgets. And the other key part is the work you helped us with, the targets and indicators. Annually, our intention is to monitor and say, you know what, we've invested X amount in this. It really hasn't moved the dial forward on getting people out of vehicles, if that's the thing. Maybe we need to shift and put our money over here. And so this is the intention for how we hope, or we intend this process to work, so that every action is tied back to these higher level policies or strategies. I think that's the word Jerome was using in his, and our goals. So that's the interaction piece. And I think for us, I'm seeing that our communication around that, like once I explained it yesterday at the open house, the person was like, good. You're not going to attempt all of this at once. You are going to try and prioritize and give that hierarchy. And one of the reasons why we're not tying this or future council into a set of hierarchies, there's strength in the goals and the policies, but in terms of the investments, is that it allows for opportunities that we may not even know come up on a regular basis, and council to shift and to have that ability to pivot when opportunities arise, or to stay on target with, okay, you know what, we said we do this, we keep on doing it. So I'll pause there, but I hope that helps, because I think the challenge is, Jerome, I just hear the word hierarchy coming up, and I think that's one of the challenges, is how do you decide which of these policies takes precedent, and it comes down to the actions that council wants to implement. So I'll leave it there and see if there's more discussion around that.
Just a quick comment on that, and just sort of about like regarding the pickleballers, but like I think just in reflecting on like the usefulness of this document, I can understand how to like keep this document at sort of like the strategy level and up, and not to paint the document to the corner by getting actions mixed into the policies, because that's something that it's going to require prioritization, and you know, annual or biannual review, and council direction on. But by getting all these different plans into one document, it's going to sort of create a standardized structure for planning that's going to allow a certain increased capability of accountability and business planning cycle, and integration with council processes. And I think where we can get into trouble is, like, I do feel like in the presentation to the public, there is this tension that, well, if we don't mention this in here, we're going to get the pickleballers upset. And so instead of like just going for it, I'm like, okay, we need to like really clearly define what is the strategy policy level, and make sure that those statements are clear on that and don't get muddled into that action level. We run the risk of not having a document that is sort of like a vision directional document, and have it muddled with sort of the action level, and then it's there forever, and then people will be continually lobbying for this particular action that misses the point of staying on top of the objectives. And so I think like where I guess there's some concern too is that if we aren't showing the actions, like if we just clearly communicated to the public and everybody, like there is going to be this OCP document that goes to like the strategy level or the policy level, and here are some examples of the actions that are to come, but this is going to be structured in a prioritized way of like short, medium, long term, and it is subject to council review every year to prioritize. Then the pickleballers can look at the OCP like, okay, this is the general direction, and oh look, you know, potential action will be that we're going to put pickleball courts, you know, in every neighborhood. By not showing those actions, like, I mean, I guess we've had the benefit because they've been kind of mixed in already with what we've gone out for feedback. People are getting to see that, but I think the finalized document, if it's not clearly all teased apart, we run the risk of having struggles in being able to like have a good process around prioritizing actions and having that. And so that's kind of been just my thoughts thinking about how to set this up. Lisa, saw your hand up, or is that a holdover?
No, it's not a holdover. I thought one of the things I do need to mention, and I perhaps don't need to remind this committee, but I do know others will be watching, is that the strategic document is adopted by bylaw. So it goes through this, you know, rigorous process, and with the actions separated out, and maybe there's more we can tease out from the existing document through the edit that we're doing now. But all the other actions that we've got on hold from what council's other documents, is it allows council the flexibility to pivot more easily, rather than going through up to a 6-month process each time to change a document, to put in more actions or tweak actions. And it allows you to do that with your annual strategic planning. So it's this is the format we're following. And I do think, and I hope that, I think Mr. Lindsay did point out that council did also direct us around doing that editorial piece. I mean, Councillor Bonner picked up on a few very specific things that were refining the wording that I think also speaks to what Jerome is talking about as well. So the challenge is, in terms of time, is that we're coming back to council with those edits and amendments May 9th. And that's a pretty tight time frame for turnaround, but it does give us the time to do that. And so, we're hopeful that we will further refine. The overall structure, though, seems to be working for the general public that we've gotten feedback on, and we had a few what I'd like to call guinea pigs who were kind enough to give us a little bit of feedback, particularly on the visuals and how to move through the plan in terms of the tables of contents. But there's, this is the tricky thing with this level of planning, and I don't know who used the word experiment, but we didn't know if we were going to end up with 1 or 5 documents at the end of this. And we've ended up with one integrated. And we are really hoping that from the land use perspective and the coordination, which is a little bit different than some of the other policies, but tied, that we've gotten a good handle on particularly the mobility, transportation, transit, and how that ties to land use. And that it's not that that's separate from policy, it is tied. So I'm hoping that you will have some faith in us that with the next iteration, that the policies, while they won't be perfect, because they're still going to kind of reflect some of the feedback we've gotten from the community, phase 1 and 2, and even some of the language that we tweak, it's going to be mindful of that direction too. But at the end of the day, Councillor Gesselbart and Councillor Bonner, Council can direct us whichever way they please. So with that, I will pause.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions on this from other members of the committee? Jerome, do you want to follow up with anything? Just anybody else in the committee have any questions on specifically on this? Okay. Jerome, did you have any?
I'm not sure. I mean, I think what I'm hearing is that there is an editing process happening, both in terms of wording, but also in terms of structure. And Lisa's talking about these plans being integrated. So I'm really hoping that and I think the message I'm getting is that this is happening in terms of integration, also in terms of coherence of the language and the structure and the way that the information is being presented, but also how it's consistent across the plan. I think my concern came mostly out of the fact that, we were still, it's seemingly in the process of even discussing the wording that should be used, and it was put out to public, scrutiny or consumption. And that surprised me in that sense. I thought, well, that's still very much a draft of a draft or something and so it went out. So I thought, okay, well, if that's how it's happening, when does that process of editing happen? When do those major pieces get structured and integrated and coherently organized? So if this is a process that's ongoing, as Mr. Lindsay said, then that's great, fantastic. But 2 weeks ago, that was not the impression I was getting. But obviously, I don't see everything that happens in the background. We're just going month by month. So I guess I'm happy to leave it as is if it's something that's being done. Okay, great. I think from what I'm seeing, how this plan comes out, and sort of what I've been hearing, and urban planning about greater coherence and structure for cities. That what we've been doing in this community plan is pretty innovative, and I think all the right pieces are in place. I'd say I'm a little concerned on the timelines to give enough time to actually do this and all the pieces, just right, because it's a lot of things being brought together, and there's so much variation in language and structure from all the different plans to make it all coherent. It takes a lot of work, and I think we'll see sort of this next iteration of the draft that comes out, and if more work needs to be on that, maybe council will have to look at do we want to push the timelines, or is it worth sort of making sure everything's done to the best. And staff have been working like crazy on this, and I'm not enviable about the amount of work that's been going on, but I really do admire sort of the willingness and intent to build an integrated plan, and I think it could be something special at the end of it. So if folks are happy with that, we'll move on to the next section. I just see another Lisa, your hand up there.
Councillor Gesselbart, you actually kind of said what I was thinking, and ultimately, this is council's plan and the communities, and the timelines are set by council. And, we've been aiming for a certain timeline so that this council under its term can consider this plan adoption. But council is that we are at the direction of council in terms of the timelines. So we think we've made a fairly good first cut, and there'll be a second cut coming. But ultimately, I think you've articulated council has the ability to shift those timelines and direct us accordingly. And we'll see where we go from there.
Thanks, Lisa. And Bill? You're on mute.
I haven't heard that enough. I don't want to belabor the point, but the integration of all of this is really quite groundbreaking, as you pointed out, and it's as far as we know, it's the first time it's really been attempted in Canada, and it's really obvious, but when it's done, that it'll be a spectacular vision for not only the community but the organization to take its marching orders. So we've got all of our departments coming together on it. One of the things that we're talking largely about is just the structure and how it is communicated out. There's nothing new in this plan that hasn't been sort of sussed out and talked about and discussed, not only at the council level but also at the community level. And we've been receiving this feedback and receiving this input and using staff's own expertise in developing a lot of these policies. I'm going to just put air quotes around policies for a minute. But it's all, and the cohesiveness and the coherence that we're seeing universally is coming together in this package. And while it may not be the language, because Parks and Rec and Culture puts in, a certain form of language, planning puts in another, engineering puts in another, we may not be coherent that way. It's all there, and it may be some tweaking to get the language perfect, but that's it. We're now in the detail phase of trying to clean it up, as opposed to the overall concepts. With no offense to anyone who holds a degree in planning, planners look at policies as those sort of visionary statements. Legislators look at policies as visionary statements and a bunch of other things. So I think we had at the council meeting the other night, we had a discussion around, well, where's this policy? And human resources has a certain way of structuring policies. So that maybe muddies the waters. I always like to have to remind myself that when a planner talks about a policy, it means what are we doing? What is the direction the community's going? And then those action plans are the how are we getting there piece. Anyways, I'm sorry to belabor it, but I just wanted to toss that in there.
No, that's great comments, Bill. And I think, it has been really interesting with all the different departments putting it into one document. There just are everybody's understanding of what a word means and how it's used in a specific realm. And I think it's this is part of the parcel of breaking down silos and getting on the same page. So thanks for that. And I'm appreciative of the big effort everybody's put in. And Jerome, the feedback is definitely heard. And I think that is something that we'll be keeping an eye on as things progress here. So just keeping an eye on the time here. I think if everything's good, we'll move on to the next section here.
I have to excuse myself. I got a class in 6 minutes, so I got to go. But
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jerome.
And my comments are meant to be constructive, not just like do it as criticism. But I mean, I'm seeing it from somebody who's at arm's length from the internal workings and being a career person at the city, which there's a lot of institutional knowledge of, and seeing how things connect. But at arm's length, sometimes that's not obvious. And so I think from the perspective of somebody like most people who don't know the internal workings, there are gaps there that sometimes appear. I think that's really what I'm pointing at.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Lisa.
I I was wondering through the chair, yourself and Councillor Bonner, if we might be able to switch the order with respect, unless Mr. Harding, it's really time sensitive to do the information update on Westwood Lake, if we could switch the order and do the engagement next, but it's up to you guys. So I'm just throwing it out there. Let's
switch the order. Is that okay with you, Richard?
Well, I don't have the agenda in front of me, so I wouldn't have known any difference. Even
okay.
I'm just here to whenever we do
no,
it.
everybody's consenting to the order change. I'm not seeing anybody reach out at me, so consider it changed. Go ahead, Lisa.
Okay, so this is a part of the presentation or the meeting I've been really looking forward to. So Ting is going to run us through some community engagement, and we hope that as many of the committee as possible will weigh in and give us some feedback in this component. I saw Elise send us a link, so really excited to be listening to this part. So over to you, Ting.
Thank you so much, and I will share my screen again. And yes, this is the part that I'm really excited about as well. So the purpose of this this agenda item is to share some of the initiatives that we are considering pursuing or have the opportunity to support. And then really the focus is, you know, to get some ideas from this committee. We know that you all had a lot of background and experience engaging different demographics, and so we really want to get some great ideas from all of you. So I just want to say that you know, we recognize that even with all the policy tools that we have and the plans that we are putting together, engagement and education is also always going to be a very important part of doing our work. And the draft city plan, you know, had this statement about, you know, in order to really achieve and move towards our goals, it is important that people are engaged in our community, adopt this environment-friendly attitudes and behaviors. Our previous community sustainability action plan also supports outreach and education to residents, and we have been doing that for many years. But of course, now, you know, we're looking at specifically some of the new and very ambitious goals, and this is an opportunity to maybe review, you know, where are the gaps and where are the opportunities. As a local government, you know, they're kind of like that, the roadmap to BC, the 2030, you know, document. It kind of, you know, has different level of maturity. So there are tools that we can use and ready to use. It's either incentives or regulations, but then there are also things that, you know, right now we're at a place where, you know, the encouragement, education, and you know, specific kind of incentives that would really help getting the community on board. So there are three specific initiatives I want to touch on. The first one is ICLEI Canada project. So ICLEI is an international network of you know, basically called a local government for sustainability. It's a network that that supports climate and sustainability projects across the globe, and then there is a Canadian kind of entity here that often get federal fundings to support local governments initiatives. They have done a lot of climate resilience work, and this one is called Agents of Change, and it's specifically to support municipality to establish a local volunteer program on climate change mitigation. So it's impact oriented, and it will include professional support and $15,000 in funding in establishing this new volunteer program. We have partnered with the regional district in Nanaimo, submitted a successful application, and the staff will work with experts to build this program. And we have basically started the application process, and this project is going to go until March 2023. And we have received 6 volunteer organizations in Nanaimo in support of this application. So we're going to be hopefully working on this very soon with the support of council. There is a report going to council on April 4th. And the next one is called the Coolest program. You might have heard of this. This is a program that has been run by the BC Sustainable Energy Association. and it's been run for over 10 years in the Lower Mainland and the Capital Region. And it's meant for elementary and high school classes. And they ran this climate education workshop and then a 4-week-long contest. So each student will have a chance to work through this action book and identifying opportunities at home and through personal behavior change and how they can, achieve a higher score. And that 4 weeks is really meant that they can adopt this new behavior and form a new habit. And then the individual student will get a score, and collectively the class will get a score, and whoever gets the high score will win prizes. And so this initiative is being supported by council, and we're allocating up to $10,000 to support this workshop in elementary and high school classes in this semester. So the next one is called EcoHack City Initiative. We've been approached by this organization called Earth Day Canada, and it is one of their programs. So they do run Earth Day celebrations. So that's every April 22nd. But they also have these unique initiatives that runs outside of that Earth Day, time frame. And so this one, they run a public panel event and some leadership training for local change makers, and we'll basically be working with them in organizing and identifying the local experts for the public events, and also they will facilitate a closed workshop of cross-sectional change makers. So that is still kind of in the work. We are waiting to confirm the schedule. It might happen later this year, and we are still in the process of determining the theme, what we want to focus on. And that's something that they're looking to us to tell them what we want to focus on. So that's something that we are also kind of curious to hear from you. If you have some ideas, if we're going to do something like this, what do you think will be a good focus for us? Yeah, so this is the part that we're going to move towards, kind of turning the table towards you. And so you have a chance to tell us a bit about, your experience, what really great kind of a project or ideas that you encounter. And we'd love to know, what is it and why do you think it is relevant or important? How is it successful? And whether you see yourself have a role in it. And we encourage you to bring some materials to help us visualize it or understand, the content. Just want to remind everyone that anything that you shared at this committee will be included in the minutes, and I will request to have this material to be included so that the public can access it. And we're going to try for 5 minutes for each person, up to 5 minutes. If you don't need the full 5 minutes, that's okay. During the first round, we do want to hear from everyone, and maybe just focusing on one idea or project in your first round. And if you have time, we'll maybe do a second round. So I think I will then turn this over to you, Ben, as the chair.
Great. So just some clarity, Ting. Basically, you want to hear from each committee member on just different engagement ideas to engage community around climate action.
That's correct, or environmental sustainability broadly. I should clarify that what we're looking for more is, how to engage different demographics. And we kind of assume that, we want to focus on, climate and environmental sustainability actions. So it's really more about, different ways to engage and, where we haven't really done enough. And here are some innovations that, that could help us reach out to certain parts of the community. I hope that helps clarify.
Yep, that's great. So if you can stop sharing the screen just so that we can go into gallery view. And we'll open it up, and it would be great to hear from everybody on the committee, just their thoughts on engagement, different groups that could target, or ways that we can go about doing it, anything that comes to mind. So anybody like to go first?
And I think you might just pick someone.
All right.
No one volunteering.
I'll start, and we'll kind of go around the circle. So okay, I see Lisa hand go up. Go ahead, Lisa.
Hi. not sure how to put my hand down now that I have it up, but anyway, and I apologize for the awesome voice here. I haven't been feeling all that well, so, but obviously I have access to a pretty large group to engage, as how probably Lisa and Tang have already mentioned, and I know Tang, we're looking at an opportunity to meet like next week, which I think would be great to have that, and just in hearing the plans and what you've shared tonight, I can think of a few other individuals from the school district that might be pretty helpful in having be part of our discussion around the Cool It program especially. So I think that that program in itself is an excellent way to engage our school district community and get them involved in a really exciting way. So I just wanted to say thank you, Council, for supporting an opportunity like that, and I look forward to doing what I can in my role at the school district to help support that being successful. And I do have a meeting coming up tomorrow. Our school district has an environmental a board committee, environmental focused, and so I'll make sure at my meeting tomorrow that I mention some of the initiatives that you've got here, that you've mentioned here tonight. And I know that we have representatives on that committee from various departments in the school district, as well as students themselves. And we do have, besides myself with a bit of district time, but we also have a community schools coordinator and a learning coordinator, like designated full-time people that have environmental pieces on their portfolio. So I guess I'd like to suggest that I invite them to a meeting that we're setting up, Tang, and then we can further our conversation about sort of how we can work to engage all of our students in the district, and what a wonderful opportunity. So I won't get into all the details now. I have lots of ideas in my head for sure, and I can't wait to have the opportunity to connect with you and see what we can work out. So thank you.
Great, Lisa. Thank you. And I think that's a wonderful idea to have a meeting with Lisa and a few folks from the community school coordinators. And that, I know at the RDN, there's been quite a lot of involvement in zero waste programs, and there's the eco clubs as well at all the high schools, and it's an awesome network and good stuff happening. So that's really cool that the city can integrate even more closely with these groups.
All right,
Tim, did you want any response on that, or go ahead?
Oh, yes. I just want to say that one of the questions I had, and hoping that Lisa can help me, is really how to, the Cool It program goes directly into the classrooms in schools. And it just reminded me that there are also students who are doing independent studying. So I will be curious to know how to engage and reach out to those kids and make sure that they could be included as well.
I'm not sure if you wanted an answer for that right now, or you want to talk about it after, but yeah, we definitely have ways to reach a variety of different kinds of students in our district. So not just the ones that are in our regular kind of bricks and mortar program, but definitely we have a whole variety of programs and ways to connect with them. So I'm happy to share that with you.
That's excellent. That's all I need to know right now. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. Okay, Lindsay.
Hey, everybody. Yeah, Ting and I had a meeting at White Rabbit Coffee about a week ago or so, and she told me about the Cool It program, and we thought it would be very fun to see if we could try to get some empirical data on the families or the parents of the kids that get this program in their lives, just to see if there's some statistical change we can measure about pro-environmental behavior or pro-environmental attitudes and intention, and see if that continues afterward, after the program's over, and then maybe in some kind of longitudinal study, measure it over time, even in a year or a couple years, just to see about the sustainability or the maintenance of the effect that this program has. And it could be that the program itself collects this kind of data, but it could be kind of unique for us to try to do that. And because it's sort of ethically good to talk to parents, it's hard to collect data with kids sometimes, but it'd be neat to do it with the parents to see if that has any spillover effect at home at the household level. I thought that would be fun.
Great idea. And I see Lisa's hand up. Did you have a response to what Lindsay was sharing?
Yeah, I did. Actually, we've had other programs in the district, more so around sort of physical activity in our students. We've had a project recently that happened with a group of our local pediatricians who researched some action that on a particular program that was implemented. So we have a structure in place, and it has been done before, that type of research. So I think that's got some great potential there for sure, Lindsay.
Right on.
Cool. Love to see these integrative programs with the school district, the university, and the city. It's great. Lindsay, did you have anything else to add to that before we move to the next person?
No, I mean, I've tons of ideas about measuring, as you've heard me say before, sense of place, so place attachment, things like that, and how it connects to behavior. But I think keeping it more direct and rooted in some of the things that Ting has already put forward, I think it's practical and good to link what I say to those things. So, but I can think more broadly and more clearly later and send an email or something.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Ting, did you have a response on that thread there?
Yeah, I think that is just the thought around that. Well, for one thing, I feel like, research of that nature really plays to Lindsay's strengths. But on the other hand, my consideration is that, we do a lot of these engagement education program, and the BC Sustainable Energy Association, they have been doing this for a long time. They do have some estimates in terms of how much, GHG reduction they expect to see through the delivery of the program. But I think this is an opportunity not only for us to have some idea of, how effective our programs are, because we're good at doing these kind of things, but as we probably all know, it is pretty difficult to actually have to bring some rigor and understand the actual impact, how to measure the investment that we have put into this community and what we're getting out of it, and how long do they last. So that's the kind of intention behind it. And also think that this is an opportunity to perhaps also provide that feedback to the program, to BCSEA, and provide the template perhaps in other areas where we can then compare, how to deliver it, how to improve it to kind of increase its effectiveness. So I just want to add to that, and I will pause there.
Great. I'm not ignoring you, Dawn, but if it's not on this thread, I see Dave's hand up, and we don't normally get to hear from Dave. So Dave, it's all you.
Yeah, no, if it's on the thread, please go to Councillor Bonner first. But I was just going to quickly add to the comment about monitoring the behavior of families. So one of the proposals that we have for the Agents of Change program would be related to that as well. So there may be some synergies between the two programs. But the successful proposal we put in, quite brief because we're going to work with ICLEI to kind of further refine it, but would be to monitor behavior change and actually use some tools to monitor GHG emissions based on personal behavior choices. So there's some opportunity to blend those two programs. So I really appreciate Lindsay's comment there.
Cool. Thanks, Dave. Don?
Thanks, Jer. Under maybe an eco hack for our city, our Rotary Club typically goes out on the first and third Saturdays of each month and does a little cleanup. And this Saturday they're going up the Olds Road area and the highway and doing a cleanup there. But on April 23rd, they're in recognition of Earth Day. They're doing a much larger garbage collection event. And I thought that this might be a way to, if we could make it bigger even than what they're suggesting, and make it citywide, and encouraging people to participate and doing something like along those lines. It might be a way of getting people, again, interested in our ecology and climate change and garbage and everything else that needs to be taken care of. So that's just an idea, and I can forward this information to anybody that wants if they so desire.
Cool. Thanks, Don. Elise, Harvey?
I can go.
You.
I also met with Ting, which was really nice to have a real human in front of me. Identifying that like I'm the youngest person in this committee, I have a different perspective. And so I had multiple ideas, but because this is focused on communication and engagement, my idea was to do a social media takeover. And so for those of you who might not know what that is, you basically have a figure. So say, for example, it was me. Then I would go on to the City of Nanaimo's social media, whether it be Instagram or Facebook or like the newsletter website, those media channels, and just exemplify through little videos, small but effective actions that the average everyday citizen can take, because I personally find climate change, as I'm sure many of you can relate, to be quite overwhelming, but we need to take action. And so doing small things that are possible, that are accessible, that are low barrier, gives people a sense of empowerment, and so incentivizing people. So for example, you could have a video of someone maybe biking to work once a week, not every day, but once. It makes you healthy. You're reducing those transportation emissions. Another one could be just like showing a video of instead of going to a larger grocery store, you wait and you time to go to a farmer's market, since we have several and we have a year-round growing season. Another could be you're on a walk and you notice that there's an invasive plant, so you pull it out and take care of it responsibly. And you could have a contest where people can post like the garbage they pick up, Dawn, for example, or the invasive plants they remove, and show the haul, and then be entered into a contest, so that we're rewarding these sort of behaviors and actions, because people are so busy with their life that they do need that incentive, and we do need to lead them and encourage them. And another one could be like you're going out for brunch on a Sunday, which we all do every once in a while, but you have leftovers, and so you put them in your reusable container and you take them home. They're small things, but they're simple, and I think they're digestible, which is how people like to be communicated with, at least to start with, on these large topics. Thank you.
Very awesome.
So the link, sorry, I sent you is just like a rough example I posted on my Instagram. So you can click that link and just watch the video, so you have a better idea of an example. Thank you.
That'd be super awesome. It'd be great, Nanaimo, producing all these little short video clips of sustainable actions, and yeah, different folk getting into that. That's a really cool idea. Who'd like to, Wally, Harvey, any thoughts?
Yeah, I'll make a few comments on it, Mr. Chair. As you know, I come at it from the council's role of providing services, and to provide services, you need assets. So it's the asset management program. And we have been adamant with everyone we can get to listen. Not everyone does, but we get them to listen as much as possible. You cannot today consider your asset management programs without integration of resiliency and climate change, nor asset management. They're one file, very clearly on that. For all the wrong reasons, we have a better dialogue these days. We spent the last decade arguing about the science of climate change, which is unfortunate, because particularly south of the border, very little has gotten done because they've been arguing about the science. We've had very few arguments this past year when you look at the weather bombs that have come through, and the fires in Fort McMurray, and the flood then following in Fort McMurray and Cache Creek. It's a little easier at the moment to get people's attention that these things cannot be ignored. Call it what you want. If you don't want to call it climate change, that's fine. We don't argue with people about that anymore. We say, look at reality. And if we don't deal with those realities and what they're telling us with the increased moisture and so forth, I heard a very interesting piece of science from one of the experts on it, that with the warming of the Arctic, for every degree of warming, you get 7% more capacity of the atmosphere to hold water. If that's the case, then we wonder why we get heavier, higher duration rainstorms and more things to deal with. That's pretty easy to figure out. So I think we have a lot better attention span with people these days and less argument on things, and much more willingness of people to listen. And that may have some approaches of how we approach our dialogue with residents.
Great. Thanks, Wally. Elise, did you have another comment there to make? And then we'll go to Ting.
Yeah, this is another idea. Again, just for like the ease and access of communication. Like if you walk around the city, unless you're like maybe one of the people like us in this group that are more aware of the reality of climate change, like you're not seeing any visual communication that something very serious is happening. And I just want to reiterate the power of like visual arts. And like I've said it before, but like a mural, it doesn't have to be enormous, but a mural that says like, by this year, the water may very well rise to this level. And just to like, you got to make it easy and accessible for people to understand and put it there, but in a beautiful way. Thank you.
That would be a really cool mural contest. It's sort of like climate communicative art. Ting.
Yeah, I also really love that idea because I agree that, we have a lot of these ambitions and beautiful visions that sits in a document, and a really big document. And we probably start thinking about how when, visitors and people who live in a city actually can visualize and feel connected in some way. It's like, I found it's a very powerful experience when, you can find a pollinator garden and there are signs or, there are visuals that tells you, where the sea level will be. And those are really powerful visual reminders, and it might be more profoundly impactful than, a document. So I guess I have a follow-up question for Wally. I was just trying to tease out, related to your comments, do you feel like there is a particular audience that we should be engaging with? Is this the large property owners or asset managers? I know that you have a lot of background in, asset management. So I just want to hear from you whether, there is a particular group or demographic that you think we should, try to engage with.
Well, we're certainly engaged with the asset management community, not only in Nanaimo and British Columbia, but across Canada. I sit on the FCM technical committee on that, and climate change is very much on that agenda because it affects everything we do. That dialogue is a little easier for the reasons I mentioned right now. And I think that's one area we also can get the citizens to understand better. All they've got to look at some of the things that have happened. Look at Abbotsford and so forth this past year. It's reality. Why did we have a major flood in Fort McMurray? Because we burned down 2/3 of the watershed. Why did Cache Creek flood out? The same thing. So if we ignore these things, there's a real impact on people's houses. If we don't deal with the storm drainage and the heavy rain events, it has a personal effect on them. And what we found is we have to personalize an awful lot of communications. I'll give you one quick example. I had a lady say to me one day in Nanaimo, well, the aquatic center is closed for maintenance. And I said, yep. And I knew I could get away with this because I knew her well enough. I kept a straight face and I said, well, it's going to be open shortly. He said, my kids couldn't go swimming. And I said, yeah, they need to clean the pools and fix all the equipment and so forth. That's every year. Very, very important to do that. And I said, oh, they're going to be done next week. Then we're moving the whole crew to the water treatment plant. Maybe we're going to close it for 2 weeks. And she looked at me in horror and said, you can't do that. And I said, why? We closed the aquatic center. That's water. She said, it's different. And I said, thank you. That's what I needed you to tell me. Water isn't water. Water was swimming for one. Water is potable and drinking for the other. There was a tolerance level that I got her to understand of not having her kids swimming. There was not a tolerance level for not having drinking water. So we've really found that we've had to personalize those stories and get them in people's heads of things that it affects them, and then they can relate to it. Too often we say, you should do this or you should do that. People, yeah, whatever. That's lessons we've learned over quite a period of time, and it really is quite an interesting way to talk to people. And you're not insulting them at all. You're just really trying to give them examples of what impact it might have on their life and where they're at. What she told me is water wasn't the same, and she didn't realize that she told me that till I reminded her.
Well, that's a good point. You got a big thumbs up there from Bill Sims. Lindsay.
Hey, yeah, I just with the talk about messaging and framing and visuals and stuff, we just have to remember there's a lot of literature in environmental psych and social psych and other social sciences about what can scare people and turn them away from reacting and behaving the way we want them to, or the way that they should be doing in terms of being eco-conscious. A lot of people are dealing with eco-anxiety or climate anxiety, and so it's often better to give people sort of innovative, positive options of what things could look like, not going full throttle on the scary imagery of what Nanaimo is going to look like in 50 years if we don't do X, Y, Z. And then following up with that, there's lots of cool things we could do in the meantime to gently sort of role model for people using posters or images or pictures online and just in the community itself. Like, people respond really well to being directly shown what to do because we're social animals, right? We watch and observe what other people do. And when we understand that that's part of a social norm, we will do that too, because we feel that the social risk of ostracism or whatever is lower. So if we see people recycling or sorting or throwing away litter and stuff, we tend to mimic that. But if we actually show people what not to do, then people will do the wrong thing. So if we choose to go make visuals, we should consult some of the cool literature that's out there on what to do and what not to do, because there's lots